In this video, we're going to be working on 15.29, the racing car. Let's read the description here. It says, write a program that simulates car racing as shown in figure below. The car moves from left to right. When it hits the right end, it restarts from the left and continues the same process. So that sounds familiar, right? You can use a timer to control animation. Redraw the car with new base coordinates, XY, as shown in figure 15.34, and I assume this is it right there. And also let the user pause, resume the animation with a button, press release, and increase the car's speed with up and down. Ooh, that one sounds challenging. But we are right, or Chris is right, that we probably can reuse a lot of the stuff that we already have. However, we need to create the car before we can move it. Now, we can do this a couple different ways. One would be that we create the car as a separate class, and actually that's the best way to do it. And often I would do that as a separate file, but I think that just for sake of efficiency, I will create a separate class inside of the class file that I'm going to create, if that makes any sense. Alright, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a new class file. We'll call it exercise 15.29. Get that main method in there. Let's just take care of all the preliminaries right away. That's right, we have to do this. Once again, let's just copy some code. See how quick and efficient we can be about this. We're going to need that scene and stage stuff probably. And I'm just thinking to myself as I looked at this, we already did this like pause and play stuff, right? We have a path transition. Heck, can we just copy all this? I vote yes. I'm not saying that it's going to necessarily work as is, but if it gets us most of the way there, why not? Alright, so there's a bunch of things that we've created here that don't exist yet. Should we just use a pane again? Should our path be a line? Are we going to need any text? Might we need to set a node though? Maybe. So I'll just comment it out and not delete it. Alright, so look at all that code we already wrote. We didn't hardly do a thing yet. Adding the imports. Alright. Now, we have that pane called pane, but I'm having some thoughts here as to if that's maybe the best approach. So I'm going to actually come to the very bottom of the document. And remember I told you I'm going to create a class file, or a class, but instead of doing it as a separate file, I'm going to do it internal to the program. And I'm actually just going to use the keyword class. And I'm having kind of a little bit of a thought here based upon my experiences. And I'm not asking you guys necessarily to memorize all this stuff right off the bat. So don't feel like you're missing something here. If you read through the book carefully, this is a fairly advanced little exercise, and there are examples that you can pull from. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to create a class called CarPane that extends pane. So CarPane will actually be a pane. And then when I come up here and actually instead of using a pane, I'm actually going to create a CarPane. Maybe call it car. And you'll see how that plays out when we get there. And then clearly this will be called car, right? Maybe? I'll let you think about it. Seems to work for me. All right, going back to the class at the very bottom. We need to draw the shape in the book. They were so nice to give us the dimensions. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? Saves a lot of guessing. So let's just break down these shapes. We need to have clearly a rectangle, right? Looks like it's 10 pixels tall and 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pixels wide. All right. So let's do that first. All right, that thing's still running. See that? Goodbye. All right, so where am I here? All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to create a rectangle, and what should we call that? Body. I like that. Body. Oops. Body. And that's going to be a new rectangle. And then here's where we have to do a lot of thinking, because the parameters for a rectangle are start xy, end xy, right? So if you think about how a rectangle looks, let's say this whole screen's a rectangle, right? So we have a starting xy and an ending xy, and then it fills in the lines and the blanks, right? So we could very simply just create a shape that has these parameters. So, where are we starting and where are we ending? That's really my question. It starts in the top left corner, right? Okay. And here they're giving us all these coordinates. And we're going to have to be able to create this so that we leave enough space for the wheels and for the top. That's why they're giving us this whole grid. So this is the 0 point, or is it? You see how the coordinates go? Okay, so the x's go up and down, or excuse me, left and right. So this is x, and notice the tip they're giving us here, plus 20, plus 40. Now why would they do that? And not just say it? Well, because it's going to be relative to where it sits. The car is going to be moving. So we have to set it up so that those numbers can change. See the challenge? Drawing the shape is nothing, right? But drawing it so that it can do something, that's a little bit more interesting. Maybe we need to figure out how big of a space we're dealing with. Now, when I did this, I did it with intent. Because I'm not just creating the car here, I'm creating the pane that it's going into. So I can predefine the shape of the pane, and then I can have the car positioned relative to the spot on the pane where it is. Does that make sense? Right? Because before we had text, and the text is one thing, but here we're trying to move a bunch of different things together. Because really what we're going to move here, depending on how you draw it, of course, is a rectangle, 2 circles, and a trapezoid. So we kind of have to bundle those together somehow. All right. So we can we agree that this is 10 pixels high and 50 pixels across? Is that right? Yes. Okay. So just for the sake of having some numbers to work with, trying to think of a good number to start with. Well, what number are we starting with? Where would it start? Okay, x would start at 0. That makes sense. And if we're drawing a rectangle, we'll bring that diagram back. So if x is starting at 0, all right, I see you got your wheels turning. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set a starting point. So what I'm going to do, and since this is a class file, all these are going to have to be privates. And I'm trying to think of, okay, base x is a good thing to call it. Set that to 0. Maybe we're better off making that a capital. And since we're going to set a starting point for x, we should probably set one for y. So we want to set it to 0. Do we want to set it to 0? No, we want. This is, okay, this is going to be for all of them. That's what I'm thinking. Now, the leftmost point obviously is going to be the rectangle, right? Having the diagram is really helpful. So when we draw the trapezoid, it will be positioned relative to the edge of the rectangle, so it would start at like plus 10, right? Not only would it start at plus 10 for the x, it would also, whatever the starting point is here, well, that actually the y's would be the same, right? Because when you do a trapezoid, you define the points. And then we also have to accommodate some space at the bottom for the wheels. We got some figuring to do here, don't we? We also have to worry about the whole fact that we're designing this as a pane itself. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to declare a couple of variables. One for width. How big are we going to make this? The car is 50 pixels long. How far is it going to travel? I don't know, 300, 400? 300, 400. All right. And since I'm declaring a W, which is for width, probably should declare one for height too, so we have a relative starting point for that. So we'll just call that H. How high are we going to go? Probably not as high as it is tall, right? Maybe like 100, 200? Yeah. Oh no, well, how tall is it? It would be 10, 20, 30 pixels tall. 100? 100 works. All right. So now we have all our private set up here. Well, at least all that we can think of right now. Let's go back to our rectangle. Relative to the 0, 0 starting point, and now I'm thinking, okay, maybe this isn't smart, right? Because if we're starting at 0, 0, that's up here. Do we want to start the rectangle at 0, 0? Yeah, actually we want the card to be at the bottom. See the challenge here? So how tall did we make this? 100. So instead of setting the y to 0, we're going to set it to whatever the height is. So I can do that with the variable, or I can type in 100. And then the rectangle, I'm hoping you guys see where I'm going with this. The rectangle, we're going to do starting xy, ending xy, right? So the starting xy for the rectangle is going to be, if this is 100, we're going to subtract 10 and 20. And there's a reason why they're giving you a subtraction there. Because then we can actually use the numbers to do it, or the variables to do it. So minus 20 to start, so base y minus 20, but that's for the y, right? I'm still going to type it in. So that'll be one of the positions. The x will be what? Where will we start the x? 0. Okay. So we can actually go 0. Yeah, there you go. And why do I do that? That's right, it can move. So base x, base y, minus 20. How long did we say it was? 50. So that'll be our new x. That'll be the ending x. And then it's how tall? 10, right? So can I just say 10? Why not? One more time. We need to change the base x to plus 50. So you're saying I should do this. Okay. So that's going to move? Okay. All right. So that's our x. What about our y? Base y. And I always throw this in. Hey, imagine what it takes to write like an actual video game. Yeah, you wouldn't be doing like this. You get higher level tools to do it. But this is where they all started. Right? People who wrote all those first video games. Yeah, oh yeah. Very much so. Well, it looks like we also have to add a library here. We got our rectangle. All right, so now we have a rectangle. Hooray, hooray, right? What about the two circles at the bottom? And you know, now that I think about this, this should probably be private also, right? So really what we're doing is we're creating a bunch of private variables because they're all in class file. We don't want those to be changed. We want them to just be what they are. That's the why. We need two circles. So we just go circle. There you go. Wheel 1 and wheel 2 probably. All right, so what are the parameters for a circle? X, Y, and radius. All right, let me go ahead and add the import statement. We get rid of those underlines. We know we need a semicolon here. So now we got to do the same thing. So we need X, Y, and a radius. Now we're sitting kind of in the middle here, right? So this is 10 pixel increments, so the middle here is what? 15? All right, so 15. And the radius then is 5, right? That part we know for sure. Let me just actually do this. We're going to have three different expressions here. We know the radius is 5, that's the last one. Now, just like the rectangle, we need it to adjust dynamically. So we probably, for the x, want to do something relative to base x, right? Base x is equal to 0. So to position this to 10 and then halfway through 5, 15, we have to add 15 to it, right? Base x plus 15. So then the y should be what? Base y minus, what did you say? y5. Okay. Okay, minus 5. Okay, yes, sure, that would work. All right, so that's the first circle. Now we're going to repeat this for the other one. The only thing we have to change is the base x to 35. And why? Because if this is 15, that's 25, that's 35. The y doesn't change. So that's a very astute observation. All right, now let's do the polygon. It's going to be another private polygon. Somebody explain to me how polygons work. And what should we call it? The cab? What's that? Roof? Top? Top? I would call it top. Could make it a convertible. Right? Nobody says we can't. We could make it a monster truck if we want. Yeah, I'm just going to call it top. Maybe that's not a good choice. Car top? Alright, so now we got to figure out the parameters for a polygon. How does that work? How it works? We can put as many points in there as we want, right? So, back to our little diagram here. So the x is going to be what? Base x plus 10 to start, if we start here. Can we agree on that? Base x plus 10. Then that first y is going to be base y minus 20. Base y minus 20. From there we're going to go to base x plus 20. And the y is minus 30 according to this chart. All right, next line. I'm running out of space here. Probably indent it a little bit. Okay, so the next coordinate, so we did this one and now we're going to do this one. So this one's only changing in the x, so I should be able to take those two. And what did I say it was only changing in the x? We're going to add 10 to x. And we got one more pair of them to do. or 2 more pairs, right? So this one will be base x plus 40. And since I already have them copy-pasted, base x plus 40. And base y minus 20. So 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. So do we have to go back to where we started, or are we good? I think we're good. If not, we'll find out pretty quick. All right, so that part establishes the shapes. Let's do the import here. Now we got to color those shapes, fill them. All right, so we have, follow me here, folks. I know this one's a little challenging. Public all right, this is what we're calling our pane, so this is our constructor function. You see this? And what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to do stuff like this. I'm going to do body set fill color. Well, I guess they're not dictating colors. What color should I make it? Red cars get in accidents. This one I call car top. I want to do red. Let's do red here. What else do we need to... Well, the car top, okay, and the wheels, I mean, it could just be black, right? Isn't that what would happen? Right, okay, so if we just draw a circle, it ends up black anyhow, so we don't have to do anything with those. Then what we might want to do is do a little self-reference here to get the children to add all, and then all the stuff that we're going to put in there. So what are we all putting in there? Wheel 1, wheel 2, what else? Car top, leave a space there, car top, and what's the other thing? Body? Alright, I don't see that we really need anything additional here except to add this library. And this one says set fill is not applicable for argument color. Why not? Yours works. Why does mine not work? It must be special. Oh, see why? Yeah, I did the wrong one. Let's pull that out of there. That's what happens when you let it do all the work for you. There we go. All right. And I hate to say this, folks, but we are running out of time. I got another class here starting in just a couple of minutes, so I'm not going to be able to do this all the way through. So I think what I'll do is I'll build as much as we can. I'll build as much as we can, and then I'll post the rest of it for you at a later time. All right. With what we have right now, can we get this to render on the screen? I mean, excluding the fact that this stuff might not really be relevant. We're not really moving it yet. Would this be enough to put it on the screen? Well, there's only one way to find out. And this is exercise 1529. See what happens. Hey, that looks terrible. We got some work to do here. All right, better get that car right before we try to move it around. So let's keep that image up on the screen and try to reason our way through why it's not working quite right. So I'm going to scroll down to the code. All right, so we have a width of 400, a height of 100, and actually what I'm going to do here is let me run it again so it comes up in its default size and shape. So this is the size and shape. To me it seems like some of it's off. I mean, the car top looks fine, right? Set a height of 100. So the base of y equals the height, which is 100. Right? Let's look at the rectangle. The rectangle is what's messed up for sure. So the rectangle starts at base x, that's 0, that's okay. Y minus 20, y is equal to height, so height is 100, so minus 20. Get our diagram. Minus. All right, so I'm hearing somebody say minus 80. Okay, we want to make it 20, not 80, or we want to make it 80? You're on the right track, definitely. Well, the height, if we picked out where 100 is, should be here, right? So we said height of 100. Y is h. Well, then base x plus 50, base y minus 10. That's obviously way off. What about this? Base x equals 0. Does the width have anything to do with it? All right. Now, thing we can do is let's just play with the numbers. Let's try that minus 80. All right, somebody's saying minus 90 now. For the second one. Well, how do you like that? It's not what we anticipated, though, is it? Where were we off in our assumptions? So base y starts out at the height, which is 100. We do base y minus 20. So that gives us the starting point. Then why is it base y minus 90 to finish? Well, the height is 100, not 400. It starts at 100, we subtract 20. Yeah, actually, I'm going to tell you, this doesn't make sense to me. We're trying to do it relative, is what it is.
Yeah. But, yeah, I don't get why they move it. Both of them have to change it.
I mean, because really, what we're saying here is this should be 10, right?
That's equal to 20. But then we're saying the other one should equal to...
Yeah. You know, what we're doing is we're misinterpreting the parameters that go in here. Starting point x, y, and then height and width.
Oh,
See? All right. So what's the width? 50. What's the height? 10. All right, let's try that. Right, and those won't change. Height and width aren't going to change. The starting points are going to change. All right. But everything, I mean, that looks pretty good so far. Now all we have to do is make it move. Sounds easy, right? All right. Here's where the fun begins. You thought that was the hard part? Here's the hard part. All right. I am going to write a method that's going to sit inside of this class that we're going to use to make things move. So I'm going to create it as a public void because it's not going to return anything, and I'm going to call it move. It's going to sit inside the class, and that way when we want the car to move, yeah, we're just going to say car.move. See how that will work? It's very clever. It also kind of helps to explain a lot of object-oriented principles that you might... All right. I'm just like typing it out, and I should probably talk about the logic here. So we need to move it relative to where it's located. If base x starts at 0, and we want to move it, how much are we going to move it each time? 1 pixel? We want it to move smoothly, right? So, but what happens if it's off the edge of the screen? Because, you know, that other text we were moving, that was off the edge of the screen. We want it to stay on the screen, right? What are the instructions? When it hits the right end, not when it goes off the screen. Okay. Yeah, you're on the right track logically. But, okay, so base x being 0, right? We want to make sure that we're starting at the 0 point. And if we're greater, how wide is the car? 50. And how wide is our screen? So here's where we're starting to think about the relative widths and stuff. We made that, okay, so the width is 400. That's what we made. Okay. So if the width of the car, okay, not the width of the car, if the starting point of x is beyond that 400, we got a problem, right? It's off the edge of the screen. So here's my thinking. If base x is greater than, what did we use for width? W? Then we're going to subtract from it. Or actually, we're not going to subtract. We're going to reposition it. Right, so it's moved. The base x, the left side of the car, is moved past 400, up to 400. As soon as it goes to 401, we have to go back to the other side. So where are we going to start from? Off the edge of the screen? Probably. How wide is it? 50. So what we're going to do is we're going to say base x equals minus 50. See the logic there? Then we're going to do an else. Otherwise, when we're moving it, we are just going to take base x and we're going to add 1 pixel at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to continuously call move, and what move will do is 1 pixel at a time, smoothly move us across the screen. We go off the screen, we set base x back to 50, and there it goes again. That's my thinking. All right. All right. Now, the problem is we have all these different things that are basing themselves around those base values, and hopefully we didn't make that same kind of mistake that we made here. I don't think we have a problem there, because all of them are relative, right? So it should be okay. So all those things need to move together. All right. So my inclination is this enough code to make this happen? All right. Why don't we experiment a little bit? Because we haven't really done that. We've focused a lot on the car and not a lot on the main body of the program. So one thing that we have to do is we have to do this transition stuff, but we were doing a path transition before. Can we do the same thing? Why not? We are. Okay. Let's see if we can make that happen. So you're saying I can just uncomment this stuff and we'll be good? Oops. All right, so do we need a line then, like we did last time? And where did that line go from? See all the parameters that we put in? This is for the text. It's going to be very exciting. All right, can we use the same values? Well, we can put them in and then see what they do. Right? The reason we set this stuff to particular values, we set this to -85 so the whole text would jump off the screen, right? So in this case, if we want the whole car to go off the screen, we'll go to, yeah. In fact, maybe we'll just go 51. All right. Then the 50 was relative to, yeah. I want you guys, there's a piece you guys are missing here. Yeah, because what we're doing is we're putting the car in a pane. And the movement for the car is actually happening independently of what we were doing before. So the path transition technically isn't going to work. Not with what we're doing here. Okay, you guys are searching now, right? And I apologize, I was on pause with the recording. So we had a little bit of a conversation that this isn't necessarily going to be the approach we want to use, because we're actually going to embed the movements into the class itself. So we're going to use a different approach, which is to use a timeline with keyframes. So I basically began to instantiate a new keyframe. It says the duration is 100 milliseconds. It's a tenth of a second. And then every time that happens, I'm going to put in a lambda expression. We are going to do car.move. So every tenth of a second, it's going to trigger that move function. So it will move 1 pixel every tenth of a second. See that? Okay. We still have to contend with the whole like moving at different speeds thing. One step at a time though. Alright, then we're going to use the timeline that we just created. Did I spell that right? And here's where we're going to put in our timeline indefinite, kind of like what we did before. So it's just going to keep going. And then we're going to tell it to play. Now the question is, I didn't do this quite right, did I? And you know what I did is, by separating it onto a different line, I kind of neglected the fact that it's actually a parameter that I'm passing. So it's really, I think I'm missing at least one parenthesis here. Yep, that's it. So this is really what it is. So timeline animation. It's a new timeline, and inside that timeline we're putting in a keyframe that runs for 100 milliseconds, and then that's going to trigger, the timeline itself is going to trigger the event handler. See how that works? So the process of the clock ticking is going to trigger the event. And I have an extra little tidbit of code here. And knowing that I'm not going to use this approach, now I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm also thinking that there's a good chance that these will probably actually work now, except we don't have something called PT, we have something called animation. And we also need to add a library for keyframe. Boy, it didn't like that, did it? I gotta check my syntax here. New keyframe duration. I spelled that right. Milliseconds. Oh, I see it. One too many parentheses. Alright, one too many parentheses there, not enough parentheses here. Alright, I'm just trying to figure out what matches what. U keyframe, this is a parameter that ends here, car move ends there. Okay, that should be right. Now it works. Okay, so now we're good. I think this might run at this point. Clearly we don't need this line. It's telling us we don't, because we're not doing a path transition. Save it, cross our fingers, and try it. It's very exciting. Certainly not moving, is it? All right. Can anybody tell me why they think it's not moving? Well, first of all, we're not using line, are we? We can get rid of that. Timeline, animation, keyframe, duration. We got milliseconds. Got our lambda. Lambda calls car dot move. And I think that's okay. We told the animation to play. That's here. We have a play and a pause set. Those are fairly inconsequential right now. Oh, I know what we didn't do. Chris, you should know this, because we had to request focus. Okay. All right, let's try it now. No, I don't think we need to do that. Now I'm taking a look at how I have these things ordered here, because I'm asking something to move, but I haven't put it on the screen yet. Okay, so now we're kind of turning things kind of topsy-turvy. We're creating the car pane. We can get rid of the line because we're not using it. And now we want to start moving that around, but it's not on the screen to move yet. So let's move that up here. And I'd probably add a blank line there. Then we can run the animation to move it. Then we can put the keys or the mouse press and release here. And we can also request focus. I think this probably will work. Let's give it a try. And this is one of the pieces that we're missing. Now that I restarted the video, I realized that it was running. All right, so we have circles, right? Wheel 1 and wheel 2. And we need to set the starting point for them. We can't move it unless we have a starting point. That's really kind of what it comes down to. So I'm going to set a center X, which is equal to base X. Now I need my diagram again. Base X plus 15, right? We got to do the same for the Y. I'm going to do this for each wheel. And this is going to be center Y, base Y, and then that's going to be where? Because we're going off of base Y. Base Y is equal to the height, which is equal to 100. So we need to subtract 5. Does that sound right? Let's just put it in and see what happens. Now we got another wheel. All we have to do is copy it and replace numbers. We'll call this wheel 2. And then we just have to adjust our numbers here. So this one, if this is at 15 and 5, that's 35 and 5, right? So the X is 35 and 5. So this is going to help us to accommodate for the motion, basically. All right. Then we have to do the same thing for the car body, which we call body. And for this one, we're not setting a center, we're actually setting the x. And that's just going to be base x. And then we're also going to have to do the same for y. Set y. And what should that be? Base y. But that's minus 20 for the starting point, right? Correct me if I do any wrong calculations. What other part do we need? The car top? All right, so this is a little bit different because with this, this is a little trickier because now we're not dealing with like just the xy's. We got all these like polygon shapes, like all these coordinates to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run this thing called get points. So it pulls in all the points for the car top. It's just a method. Then I'm going to chain onto that a clear. And then I'm going to run this again to kind of basically reset it. And instead of clearing, we're going to add. We're going to add, just like we do with get children, we're going to add all. And then inside of there, we're going to put in all the coordinates. Now, the coordinates have already been defined, I believe, right? So I'm thinking that we can just copy all these, because these are already set up to be relative, right? So that we should just be able to copy paste it. No errors so far. All right, so that sets all of our values to prepare us for moving. But if we're going to move, one thing we need to do is inside this move method, we have to say set values right here. So let's try it now. Crossing our fingers here. We can make that car move at all. It'll be a happy day. What do you think, Christian? Thumbs up? Oh boy. See what happens when it goes off the edge. Does it come back? It's going to take a while. Hello, car, where are you? See if it ever comes back. So I think we got a little bit of a problem with that. Still going to the right? Oh, there it is. All right. All in favor of... All right, now we can see if our mouse thing is working, right? How can we make it go faster? Well, we could change the number of pixels it changes, right? Or we could change the milliseconds to what? Increase it or decrease it? Decrease it. Every 100 milliseconds, it goes 1 pixel. So it takes 1 second to move 10 pixels. If I decrease this to 10, it'll go 10 times faster. Now we got a race car. Let's try that. Yeah, it's much better. Yeah, so what we did here, we set up a width of 400, but our scene is not that wide. So really those numbers should match up, 400 and 100. Let's run it again. You know what? If you guys get this far with it, even if you don't get the speed change in there, I'm totally happy with it. That's a bit of work, isn't it? There's a lot of logic to figure out. If you were to add the speed part to it, well, that requires another little trick. All right. If we have a certain speed that we're traveling, how do we adjust it to go at a different speed? I mean, I kind of already did it, right? So, okay, I know you guys are busy copying my code, so I'm letting it sit there at the very bottom of the class car pane. But I do want to add the speed controls just to show you how it's done. All right, so right here where I have these event handlers for, well, we didn't even try that, did we? I guess we probably should try that. Okay, so that works too. All right, that's good. But I'm just going to paste in the code and then explain it as opposed to type it out as I'm doing it. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting another command, but this time it's on key pressed. We're going to be working off of the up and the down keys. And if you press up, there's a method called set rate, and it's going to get whatever rate it is and add to it, or subtract from it. Now right now, I switched that to 10 so it would move faster, and maybe it would be smart for me to set it to something like 50, and then let's run this and see what the key press does. So now I'm hitting up, now I'm hitting down. I can get it to the point where it just stops, right? So that's just a little bit of code. And this is another one of these built-in methods that goes with all the timeline stuff, because everything runs at a particular rate. And then the way it can adjust it is first you get the rate, and you're subtracting 1 from whatever the rate value is. And it's just actually a pretty simple little thing once you know that it's there. So this is the program in its entirety. So those of you copying my code at home, there's the top part of the code. Pause the video. All right. Here's the next section of the code. And then beginning of the car pane and the end of the car pane. And we'll call that a program. All right, folks, we are done for the night.